first public meeting for calendar year 2015. And with that, we're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, I hope we can continue the tradition that has been established by Commissioner Whitmer in her just remarkable iammeter or pentameter complex, her poetry in motion, the way she eloquently presents the minutes, and it is 2015, Commissioner Whitmer, and with that, I'd like to recognize you in your iambic pentameter way to present the minutes of the December 4th public meeting. Commissioner Whitmer.
Well, thank you, El Capitan, El Capitan. I have wanted to let you know that I have free climbed the heights of the Capitol Dome, and Lady Liberty and I have, in fact, reviewed the minutes of December 4th's public meeting, and we move that they be approved as submitted.
Second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. And before I introduce Cheryl, I just want to get this off my chest. I know I was bragging a little bit about my Philadelphia Eagles, but Commissioner Whitmer, you clearly got one up on me, and I was waiting for it to come up sometime in the new calendar year. So.
It will.
Okay. Now it's a pleasure to welcome to the podium to commence with our public meeting agenda items, Ms. Cheryl Walker Davis. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
May it please this Honorable Commission, on behalf of your various offices and bureaus, we present for your consideration and disposition the following agenda items. Commencing this morning with matters of special interest, we have a binding poll that will be conducted to facilitate the resolution of the Emporium Water Company rate increase proceeding. We have 13 issues that will be polled. It should be noted that the polling sheets are simply a vehicle to facilitate the orderly resolution of the issues in this case. The characterizations of the positions of the parties appearing on these sheets is not conclusive and should not be relied upon. The Commission has based its determinations on the full evidentiary record, the administrative law judge's decision, as well as the exceptions and replies thereto of the parties. With that having been said, issue number 1. Removing uncollectibles expense from the cash working capital calculation.
Commissioner Brown.
I support I&E.
Commissioner Whitmer.
I&E.
Commissioner Cawley.
I&E.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
I&E.
I too support the I&E position, and it's unanimous support.
It should be noted that with regard to issues number 2, 10, and 12, Mr. Chairman, you have a motion along with Commissioner Brown. Issue number 2 is the sale of raw bulk water. Issue number 10 pertains to the capital structure, and issue number 12 is the return on common equity.
I'd like to have the joint motion entered into the record here this morning with Commissioner Brown. Before the Commission today are the exceptions and reply exceptions to the recommended decision of Administrative Law Judge Dennis Buckley in the base rate case filed by Emporium Water on April 30th of calendar year 2014. On issue number 2, the sale of bulk water, we believe it is necessary to clarify and modify the outcome of this issue. In the recommended decision, the ALJ describes how Emporium would accept $14,000 of revenue imputation, which was approximately 50% of the bulk water revenue generated in calendar year 2013. Regardless, the ALJ ultimately recommends including no revenues related to the sale of bulk water into this calculation. We respectfully disagree with the ALJ's conclusion. As such, we believe that the 50% of 2013 revenue calculation represent a prudent outcome. Therefore, we will modify the outcome of this issue by directing $14,000 of revenues to be imputed for the sale of bulk water. On issue number 10, the capital structure, small water companies often present differing and significant challenges when determining the appropriate capital structure used to determine rates. This case is no different, as evidenced by the range of capital structures presented here this morning. Equity ratios range from below 18% to all the way above 50%, and debt ratios vary from 46% to above 82%. Based on the record in this case, including financing terms and the end result of a company-specific consequences of our decision here this morning, we move that the capital structure consisting of 60% debt and 40% equity is appropriate for Emporium Water. Emporium's finances are being stressed by the decision to use a traditional rate-based rate of return regulation, while at the same time paying off its Penvest loan over a 20-year period, which is significantly shorter than the asset depreciation schedule. While the Commission has employed actual capital structure for rate-making purposes in Emporium's last 2 rate cases, we would prefer here this morning that the cash position of the company requires it to do more. We do not consider our use of a hypothetical capital structure in this proceeding as precedent-setting. Rather, the adjustment is an attempt to enable the company to recover from actual operating loss from an operating loss perspective. We encourage Emporium to explore other possible solutions, including the use of a Penvest surcharge in an effort to help the company's cash flow on a going forward basis. Issue number 12 here this morning is the return on equity. Additionally, we believe that a rate of return on common equity is frequently a material and contested item in a base rate case proceeding. In this case, the range of ROE recommendations presented by the parties is 8.89% to 11.05%. Based upon our review of the testimony, data, and cost models presented, and considering the small size of Emporium Water, the associated financial risks and the results of the ROE models, other than the DCF, the ROE in this case should be 10%. Therefore, we move that the Office of Special Assistance prepare an order consistent with this motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, the joint motion is approved unanimously.
Turning now to issue number 3, rate case expense.
Commissioner Brown.
Support I&E.
Commissioner Whitmer.
I&E.
Commissioner Cawley.
I&E.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
I&E.
I too support the I&E position. The support is unanimous. And Commissioner Whitmer, did you have a statement you wanted to make in this particular polling matter?
I do. I have a very brief verbal statement, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to note that the rate case expense here is over $350,000. And if you do the math with the number of customers that this very small company serves, it's almost 1,100 hours. It's an hour almost for every customer that they serve. In my perspective, it's testing the boundaries of reasonableness. Thank you.
I'm going to say I wish to associate myself with that verbal statement. Well stated. We'll continue on with item number 4.
Yes. Issue number 4, expenses for professional services.
Commissioner Brown.
I support the OCA position.
Commissioner Whitmer.
OCA.
Commissioner Cawley.
OCA.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
OCA.
I too support the OCA position on this polling case. Unanimous support.
Issue number 5, unaccounted for water, expenses and reporting requirement.
Commissioner Brown.
I support the I&E position.
Commissioner Whitmer.
I&E.
Commissioner Cawley.
I&E.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
I&E.
I too support the I&E position. This polling matter is supported unanimously.
Issue number 6, laboratory supplies and expenses.
Commissioner Brown.
I support the OCA position.
Commissioner Whitmer.
OCA.
Commissioner Cawley.
OCA.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
OCA.
I too support the OCA position. This is supported unanimously.
Issue number 7, maintenance of structures and improvements.
Commissioner Brown.
I support the ALJ position.
Commissioner Whitmer.
ALJ.
Commissioner Cawley.
ALJ.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
ALJ.
I too support the ALJ position. This polling matter is approved unanimously.
Issue number 8, lease administration fee.
Commissioner Brown.
I support the I&E position.
Commissioner Whitmer.
I&E.
Commissioner Cawley.
I&E.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
I&E.
I too support the I&E position.
Issue number 9, distribution system upgrade, maintenance practices.
Commissioner Brown.
I support the company position.
Commissioner Whitmer.
Company as well.
Commissioner Cawley.
Company.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
Company.
I too support the company position.
Issue number 10, capital structure has already been resolved by way of your motion. Turning now to issue number 11, cost of debt.
Commissioner Brown,
I support the ALJ position.
Commissioner Whitmer,
ALJ.
Commissioner Cawley,
ALJ.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
ALJ.
I too support the ALJ position.
Issue number 12 as well has already been determined by the motion. That gives us issue number 13, interest expense deduction for income taxes.
Commissioner Brown,
I support the company position.
Commissioner Whitmer,
Company.
Commissioner Cawley,
Company.
Vice Chairman Coleman.
Company.
I too support the company position.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, that concludes the binding poll. The Office of Special Assistance will prepare an order consistent therewith for purposes of review and approval before issuance, before the end of the statutory suspension period.
Cheryl, before we move into our next for our Bureau of Audits reports here this morning, I simply want to take this opportunity to commend ALJ Dennis Buckley and the work that he did on this particular case. I also want to thank our individual staffs. If there's one thing I noticed throughout this case is the unanimous support shown for all the polling items in this case, and it speaks to the hard work of all of our key staff members in working collaboratively, and I just want to commend them here this morning. A lot of positive outcomes, to Commissioner Whitmer's point, in a very difficult case dealing with a small water company. And Judge Rainey, please pass along to Judge Buckley our appreciation for his work on this case.
Continuing now with the presentation of agenda items and matters on behalf of the Bureau of Audits, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the three recommendations appearing on page 2 of the public meeting agenda through and including the release of the auditor's report in the proceeding involving Citizens Power Company.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Bureau of Consumer Services, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendation in the UGI Utilities, Inc. Gas Division proceeding on page 3.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Turning now to matters presented on behalf of the Office of Special Assistance, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendations commencing with Mimos Innocent versus PPL Electric Utilities Corporation appearing at the top of page 4 and continuing with all items appearing on pages 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the first item pertaining to Razier PA LLC at the top of page 9.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
It is recommended that the Commission adopt the staff recommendation in the proceeding involving PPL Utilities Corporation's Default Service Plan Number 3 for the period June of 2015 until May of 2017, noting the statement of Commissioner Brown.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Brown for purposes of her statement. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to submit my entire statement for the record, but I want to highlight the following. Before the Commission for consideration and disposition is PPL's petition for approval of its default service program for the period of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2017. I wish to focus on two issues which were not part of the joint petition for partial settlement filed in this case. First, whether PPL should assume responsibility for non-market-based PJM charges for all customer load, both shopping and non-shopping, and recover those costs through a non-bypassable charge. The second issue is whether or not PPL should expand the number of customers who receive hourly price default service. I will submit that the partial settlement does establish a default service plan that satisfies the procurement requirement under Act 129, specifically Section 2807E of the Public Utility Code. This provides that a default service provider must procure electric power via a prudent mix of spot market, short-term, and long-term contracts designed to ensure adequate and reliable service at the least cost to customers over time. PPL's proposed default service plan includes spot market products in the large commercial and industrial portfolio, short-term contracts in the residential and small commercial portfolio, and long-term contracts in the residential portfolio. The mix of contracts is by no means an exact science, but I note that if the default service plans that were in place during the recent polar vortex had been priced solely on short-term or hourly contracts, default service customers would have been exposed to extreme price volatility. Because PPL's overall plan includes a prudent mix sufficient to satisfy Section 2807E of the Code and the court's ruling in Popowski, I will vote to approve the hourly price default service for customers with demand between 100 kilowatt and 500 kilowatt. I also wish to know that I have in previous default service proceedings, as I have in previous default service proceedings, that none of the default service plans that I have voted on during my tenure include new long-term contracts. Only long-term contracts inherited from previous default service plans. These grandfathered contracts will eventually expire. I wish to clarify that, in my opinion, it will be incumbent upon the EDCs and this commission to carefully consider long-term contracts of 4 to 20 years, 20-year terms, consistent with 2807E of the code, in future default service plans unless the legislature decides otherwise. As such, I will vote to approve PPL's default service program as outlined in the partial settlement. However, I wish to register my disagreement with whether non-market-based PJM charges should be recovered for all customers via a non-bypassable charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting Commissioner Brown's statement.
On page 10 of the public meeting agenda, it is recommended that the commission adopt the staff recommendation in the proceeding involving the Duquesne Light Company default service plan, noting the statement of Commissioner Brown.
So moved. Second. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Brown for purposes of her statement. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. Once again, I do want to submit my statement in its entirety, but I want to focus on the following. Before the Commission for consideration and disposition is Duquesne Light Company's petition for approval of its default service program for the period of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2017. The ALJ recommended approval of the partial settlement filed in this case. Two of the issues which were not settled bear discussing. First, whether Duquesne should assume responsibility for non-market-based PJM charges for all customer load, both shopping and non-shopping, and recover those costs through a non-bypassable charge. The second issue is whether or not Duquesne's plan should include long-term contracts. It is in my opinion that the collection of the non-market-based charges, such as NITS, in a competitively neutral manner can work to benefit consumers by reducing the risk premiums that EGSs and the wholesale generation providers embed in their prices. This is particularly relevant for EGSs given the Commission's recently issued guidelines on fixed price products. As RISA points out in its exceptions, these costs are non-hedgeable. Therefore, requiring that EDCs to assume the cost responsibility associated with these non-market-based PJM charges for all load removes additional costs from the price customers will pay. This is the case because, unlike an EGS, EDC is permitted to recover on a full and current basis all reasonable costs incurred to provide default service. Therefore, the EDC will not place a risk premium on the recovery of these costs. This is contrary to what an EGS would do since the cost cannot effectively be hedged. Another issue which was not settled regards the lack of long-term contracts within Duquesne's proposed default service plan. Penn Future raised this issue with regard to the lack of long-term contracts to supply alternative energy. However, the record reflects that neither Duquesne's default service plan nor its 6, nor its proposed default service plan 7 includes any long-term contracts, be they for energy or alternative energy credits. In my opinion, this lack of any long-term contracts is a fatal flaw under 2807E of the Public Utility Code. This section provides that a default service provider must procure electric power via a prudent mix of spot market, short-term, and long-term contracts designed to ensure adequate and reliable service at the least cost to customers over time. The ALJ concluded that based upon the Commission's interpretation of Act 129, of the Act 129 prudent mix requirement, the Commission's approval of Duquesne's default service plan 6, and the Commission's statement in the RMI order, long-term contracts are not required by Act 129. As acknowledged by the court in Propowski versus the PUC, the preamble to Act 129 indicates that price stability was one of the goals to be achieved by that act, and that price instability was one of the harms that the act was intended to ameliorate. I know that if the default service plans that were in place during the recent polar vortex had been priced solely on short-term or hourly contracts, default service customers would have been exposed to extreme pricing volatility. I acknowledge that the mix of contracts offered in any EDC's default service plan is by no means an exact science. As such, the Commission should give deference to an EDC's chosen supply portfolio proposal unless it is blatantly imprudent. In this case, it is my opinion that Duquesne's proposed plan is neither prudent nor legal as required under Section 2807E of Act 129. So based on the recommended resolution of these two issues, I will be voting no on Duquesne's default service program. Thank you.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-1, noting the dissent from Commissioner Brown.
Continuing with the presentation of agenda items, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendation in the Razier proceeding, Razier PA LLC proceeding at the bottom of page 10, as well as the remaining two items on page 11 through and including the recommendation in the interconnection proceeding involving Windstream and AT&T Corporation.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, it is recommended in omnibus fashion that the Commission adopt the recommendations in all proceedings appearing on pages 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 through and including the recommendation in the proceeding involving the application of Gamma Ventures LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Law Bureau, on page 18 of the public meeting agenda, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the two recommendations there appearing through and including the recommendation pertaining to the implementation of Chapter 14 amendments.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
And on behalf of the Office of Administrative Law Judge, commencing on page 19 of the public meeting agenda, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendations in the first two proceedings involving the City of Lancaster Bureau of Water and the Pocono Water Works Company, Inc. Water Division proceeding.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
With regard to the rate proceeding involving the Pocono Water Works Company Wastewater Division, there is the motion, your motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to have my motion entered into the record as read in its entirety. Before the Commission here this morning is the recommended decision approving the joint petition for settlement of the rate investigation of Pocono Water Works Wastewater Division. First and foremost, I'd like to applaud the parties in this case for reaching a settlement that is fair and reasonable, and it resolves a number of the various issues associated with this case. While I believe the settlement should be approved without modification, I note that there is a minor discrepancy between the terms of the settlement and the ordering paragraphs of the RD, which is the recommended decision. In this case, per the terms of the settlement, all parties agreed to an increase of $9,500 for a total allowed annual revenue stream rates of $39,129. However, the recommended decision that the company be permitted to charge rates designed to produce an increase in base rate revenues was noted as $39,129. Therefore, just a quick editorial note, I believe that page 14 of the recommended decision should be revised to properly reflect the company is only permitted to charge rates designed to produce an increase of annual base rate revenues of $9,500. This change is not a modification to the settlement and should not be viewed as such. Rather, it corrects the recommended decision in order to conform with the terms of the settlement agreement. Therefore, I move this morning that the Office of Special Assistance prepare an order consistent with this motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On page 20 of the public meeting agenda, in the proceeding involving Marion Whirl versus Respond Power LLC, there is the Vice Chairman's motion as well as the statement of Commissioner Brown.
I'd like to recognize Vice Chairman Coleman for purposes of his motion. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask that my motion be entered into the record as though I read it in its entirety. Before us is a formal complaint filed by Marion Worley against Respond Power LLC, a licensed electric generation supplier in Pennsylvania.
In her complaint, Ms. Worley alleges incorrect charges from her supplier on an electric bill, stating the charges were absurd. I agree with the decision to dismiss the complaint on several grounds, including the lack of subject matter jurisdiction. Pennsylvania law is clear that the Commission does not have jurisdiction to regulate EGS rates, which is the sole subject of the complaint here. My motion simply clarifies that the Commission has authority to order refunds, credits from electric generation suppliers in certain circumstances. Therefore, I move that the Commission adopt the initial decision as modified by this motion, and that the Office of Special Assistants prepare an opinion and order consistent with the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Any discussion? Commissioner Brown, I would like to recognize, I believe you have a statement here this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before the Commission is the initial decision pertaining to Marion World's complaint against Respond Power. In this proceeding, the complainant alleges that Respond's charges are absurd. As relief, complainant requested the Commission's attention in this matter in an effort to resolve the situation. The record in this case shows that Respond billed the complainant over $900 in March and over $350 in April of 2014. These bills were the result of a kilowatt price of 34 cents and 18 cents. Respondent filed preliminary objections alleging lack of jurisdiction and insufficient specificity of pleading. The OCA filed an answer to the POs stating that the Commission should overrule respondent's assertion. OCA first claims that reading Mrs. World's request for relief as a request for an adjustment to her bill or refund does not remove her complaint from the Commission's jurisdiction. Further, OCA submits that under the Commission's precedent of liberal construction for pro se complaints, this case should be permitted to move forward to hearings. This Commission has often expressed leniency towards pro se complainants and acknowledged that they are not expected to be familiar with all Commission procedures. Additionally, the Commission has stated that it is in the public interest that all litigants, particularly pro se litigants, be afforded a meaningful opportunity to be heard. Ultimately, the ALJ granted both of respondents' preliminary objections. I must respectfully disagree. I find that, though not artfully pleaded, the complainant raised a legitimate concern over high bills, and the OCA's legal arguments regarding the need for hearings are convincing and accurate. The Commission does have authority over the EGS rates as they relate to items such as marketing, disclosure, and enrollments. We have noted this in recent decisions. In those cases, we determined that monetary remedies may be determined by the Commission in certain circumstances. Further, I submit that pro se complainants should be given a hearing when one can reasonably infer an accusation of improper marketing or sales activities. So where I would agree with what the Vice Chairman is trying to do in his motion, overall, I have to dissent with the ALJ's initial decision in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Before we call the question here, in reading the record in this case, and I struggled with it myself, in realizing the issues and the fallout associated with the polar vortex and the impact it had on retail rates for variable rate customers. I think, and reading the record, this complainant, obviously, when she came to the proceeding, my reading of the record is she would have been well served either by the Widener Law School project or other outside counsel to help her. However, I look at this case as a case whereby the supplier, Respond Power, could probably do a better job in outreaching to this customer and working with them. And I know we've had constant meetings with the Retail Energy Supply Association, and I'm not here to point fingers or make reckless charges against this particular supplier, but when you read the record in this case, this particular customer, whether she knowingly signed up for this contract or not, got caught in a price spike that obviously did not align with her monthly budget. And her outrage certainly was expressed in the record in this proceeding. But the Vice Chairman Coleman's motion obviously addresses the parameters in which we're working in trying to adjudicate this case. But again, I think it's incumbent upon this supplier to potentially outreach to this complaint and work with her on her issues. So, Commissioner Brown, I hate to say this, but I could go either way on this case. Unfortunately, this morning, I think the majority support is 4-1, noting your dissenting statement, which I hear where you're coming from on this particular matter. Obviously, we called the question, and the vote is 4-1, noting Commissioner Brown's dissenting statement.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, that concludes the presentation of regular agenda items. Turning now to the carrying agenda, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the staff recommendation in the proceeding involving the PPL storm damage expense rider.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
That concludes the presentation of agenda items.
And I believe we have no other items to come before the commission here this morning. We are going to gavel out because we do have a special recognition right after our public meeting. On that note, we're adjourned.